Hello, hello. Welcome back to the show. Nicole Holland here with my friend Cailen Ascher, and I am so excited to have her here with us because she's got this amazing kind of framework that she has been implementing for a really long time. And she's been teaching thousands of entrepreneurs about this, and it's like life changing. So if you're feeling like you're just working too much, you're just like overwhelmed, you definitely want to take notes on this one. So, we're going to talk about the 3-day work week, full-time income, and part-time hours. But Cailen has a really interesting story about how she came up with this and kind of started doing this. So, before we dig into the nuts and bolts of how you can apply her process, I'd love it if she can just tell us a little bit about um, how she came up with it and why she came up with it and why it works.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Nicole, for having me here. I am so excited to be sharing this. It's my favorite thing to talk about. It's what I'm all about. And the 3-day work week, yeah. So the backstory for it, it actually started right after my first daughter was born. This is about 4 years ago. And it was really just sort of a personal choice and an experiment. I was like, I've got this new baby. I know I don't want to go back to working full-time hours. What feels really good for me, just kind of intuitively, would be to work 3 days and then have 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, with her. So a 4-day weekend, a 3-day work week. But the clincher was I had no idea what this would do to my business. I was like, this feels really good for me, my husband, our little girl, but what is this going to do to my business? How am I going to make this work? But the thing that was really interesting as I stepped into it and set up my schedule and started implementing some of the strategies that I'll be sharing today was that my business not only maintained, but it actually grew and expanded to new levels that I had not previously reached when I was working full-time. So here I was working part-time hours, creating an abundant 6-figure income and having all this amazing time as well to be with my daughter. And so after living this for a few years, I started realizing that every client I talked to, every podcast I was interviewed on, everyone just wanted to talk about my 3-day work week, which was just my thing. And I didn't realize until later that I should be talking about that thing and teaching people that. So finally, I've owned it for the last few years, and it's been kind of the hallmark of my brand and why a lot of people find me, because it's a really powerful framework that changed my life and is now changing lots of other people's as well.
Amazing. Okay, so where should we begin? I don't even know. I've had the benefit of hearing you talk, and I just find it so fascinating um, how you really manage your time, how you fit it all in. And I think there's a lot of people that will think, and myself included, where I'm like, oh yeah, totally less is more. I know less is more. I block out time on my calendar, and then it's like something happens, especially the podcast, right? Like this year for the Nicole Holland show, I mean, that's 150 some interviews that I'm doing, plus my 2 a week solo shows. So that's like another 100. And so I had this great intention. I'm like, oh yeah, I've got all this time blocked out. And somehow then I let things through. So how do you kind of build out, and I don't know if this is the right place to start, but I'm just thinking, how do you build out that those boundaries, and then
Mm.
how do you stick to them when things come up? You've got to launch, you've got, life happens, and you've got to take time off for personal things, or where is that somewhere we can start at, or is there someplace better?
Yeah, I think that's a great jumping off point. And first and foremost, I always like to kind of caveat this when I talk about my 3-day work week. This process is about you finding the working hours that make sense for you, your life, your family, your business. It's not about adopting exactly what I've done, cutting your work week back just to 3 days, but moving in the direction of what truly serves you personally and professionally. So under that umbrella, I think one of the most powerful things you can do to move in the direction of making highest and best use of your time and protecting your time is to do a time inventory. And this is not like a sexy process. This is not something that like everyone's probably like jumping up and down when they hear me say this, but it's so, so effective. And it, there's lots of apps and things like that that you can get. What I did when I was first setting up my 3-day work week is I just had a legal pad next to my computer. I would set a timer for about every 60 minutes or so, and I would just pause and take a second to jot down what was the task or the multiple tasks that I was doing during that time. And this gave me, after doing this for a couple days, really rich insight into how much time I was wasting on things that weren't really important, that I didn't enjoy, that I wasn't particularly good at, and also how much I was sort of ping-ponging back and forth between tasks that could, moving forward, be batched together more effectively. And so once you sit with that and do this time inventory for a few of your work days, you start to really see where some changes can be made. And it's, if you want to do another like layer on it, doing some ranking, like, does this make me money? Do I enjoy it? Am I good at this? I mean, adding some of those questions in can be really, really helpful too, as you sort of reprioritize your time and set more boundaries.
Fabulous. Okay, what's next? So we have inventoried our time, and then we've gone through and really looked at this for insight and identified these are the priorities I need to focus on, and these are definitely not. But some of that stuff that's not a priority, it does need to get done, right? So what's that next step? Once we identify and rank, where do we go next?
Yeah, and so then the next step would be, if you're in a position where you have support, where you have a virtual assistant, someone's helping you in your business, or you're interested in getting support, this would be a great time to circle all those items that you would love to outsource. I remember back when I was first doing this, the first thing I took off my plate was Facebook ads. I'm a logical person. I can figure a lot of stuff out, but Facebook ads, I could not crack the code. And so that was the first thing that I felt really empowered to outsource after doing this time inventory practice. And so that would be a great first step. Give the things that you're not good at, you don't enjoy, maybe they have to be done, but they're not really moving the needle on your business in a big way. Hand them off to someone else if they can be handed off. If they can't be handed off, the most important thing to do is set aside conscious, delineated, chosen time for those items. So you know that on Monday afternoons, you're going to tackle all the admin stuff, or every every Wednesday before lunch, or whatever it is, or a couple minutes each day if you need to check in with something regularly, that you're choosing the time you're putting into it instead of it taking over your time and distracting you from the bigger projects and the clients that you could be working with and the stuff that's really growing your business.
Awesome. So that brings up a thought for me about, I think oftentimes, and I've had this experience, and of course I've talked with a lot of other entrepreneurs and small business owners who've also had this experience where inevitably we underestimate how long something's going to take, right?
Yes.
So even when we're tracking our activities and are aware, I think, for example, for me, emails. I I get feedback that people like reading what I write when I do a blog, which is what I'm choosing to do here in 2019, but I have refused to do for the years previously. But that blog post where I think, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 hours. Oftentimes, like, I'll write it and then I'll hate it and I'll rewrite it, and like it will take me 5 or 6 hours. And I know that that's just practice, and it'll take me, less and less time as I just strengthen that muscle, like anything. However, I'm wondering, when we're looking at batching and we're looking at, here's the things that I want to do on Monday, for example, or I'm going to spend, 30 minutes on this task. I'm going to spend, an hour and a half on this project. Um, so there's the underestimation, I think, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guilt that goes along with it. I think as entrepreneurs and small business owners, we're oftentimes very driven people, and kind of do what it takes. So do you have any, I mean, it boils down to mindset really, but there's also some tactical things we can do, I think. And I wonder if you can share some ideas on that for those times where we're working this process, we've figured out what we want, and we're designing this schedule around us, and then we're not getting it done. Because this is something I'll see people, they'll try something on, whether it's a New Year's resolution or a decision to make a real change in their life. They'll try something on, and then they don't hit success. They don't hit the expected, planned definition of success in their mind, and then they kind of give up. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I love the example you gave that, in your mind, you're like, yes, it'll take me 2 hours to accomplish this task. I'm going to bang it out. This is amazing. And then maybe not all the time, but sometimes those hours creep up, 4, 5, 6 hours with rewrites and stuff. So this is something that, yeah, maybe your first go around as you're setting up sort of your ideal schedule with your, lovely batched categories, your model calendar. Obviously, no one can adhere to the model 100% all the time. But you're noticing maybe a couple weeks in a row, wow, I'm like significantly going over this time amount. This is a concept that I call in my program real time versus ideal time. Like ideally, you would love if that email could be written in 2 hours. Real time, it takes like 5. And so what I would ask you to do there, or recommend that you do there, is give yourself that 5 to 6 hour window, or maybe you need like a 4-hour window and then I'm going to revisit 2-hour window later in the week or something like that. If inspiration strikes and you get that thing done in an hour and a half or 3 hours, the rest of that time then becomes found time that you can dedicate to a new project, a new task, maybe getting another email done so you're a little ahead of the game. But if it's one of those things that you don't like, you scrap it, rewrite, you have that time given to you so you're not feeling like you're behind or that you're failing or doing something wrong, because you're honoring the real time that it takes.
Oh, I love that. So what about okay, so let's say we've got on a given day 8 hours that we're putting in, or 6 hours that we're putting in, or whatever the case may be. And we've allocated the time. I love that, what you just said. And I've never thought about it in that way, where it's like, wait a minute, let's expand the time block rather than trying to fit everything into, right? But the truth is, if we need to be on task and on point. And so something that I do is I'll often reevaluate things. So I have this like picture in my mind about all these things I'm going to get done, right? And then I plan them out, and I'm like, okay, boom, this is the date this needs to be done, boom, this. And again, life happens, right? And my ideal plan often I have to pivot, right?
Yeah.
We'd all like to live in the ideal world. That would be so nice. So in that case, there's still only 6 hours. And let's say I've allocated 3 hours to writing a post instead of the 1 hour that I used to, because I realize I need that expansion time. And then that means I have to take other tasks away. And so I think a thought many of my listeners are having right now, and maybe a block that I'd love for you to clear up before we move forward so that people can really get this, is when it's like, okay, we can expand this, but then what about all this other stuff, right? I need to get this other stuff done. It's not an option just to not do it. And so there's more work than there are hours. How on earth am I going to really build this schedule and make it work? Do you know what I'm getting at there?
Yeah, I completely do. That you feel like there's this finite amount of time, and if you take more for something, then there's less for other things. So revisiting that time inventory in the beginning and really considering what you can remove or outsource, that cleansing piece is really, really essential. Because I have found in being a coach for years and years now and working with my clients, they often have such high, beautiful aspirations, but they are doing so much in so many different areas that it's watering down their efforts and not getting them the results that they desire. And so when it comes to figuring out highest and best use of your time, you really have to be strict with yourself about what is my main priority here, or maybe 2 or 3, but like not 17. Like, what is your prime focus that all roads lead to? I was listening to Denise Duffield Thomas speak, and she was saying all roads in her business lead to her signature program, which is Money Boot Camp. And I loved that. And I've taken that and applied that to my own business. Like, what are all roads leading to? And when you have a lens like that through which to evaluate the tasks of your day and of your week, and then as projects come up, you can much more clearly say no to things that aren't serving you, take things off your plate, maybe just put them on the back burner, like let them sit till next quarter, next month, next year, whenever. And suddenly you do have found time because you're focusing on the most important things and not on all the other noise that you think you need to be doing.
Yes, a million times over. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm speaking into a mic and my listeners have earbuds in, I would be like jumping up and down and crying right now. Because that is so important, right? It's like, this is something that breaks my heart. And I went through it because I had no idea and I didn't have the guidance to understand these things. And even when I started my podcast, and this is really why I stopped my original podcast and launched the Nicole Holland Show and took the time to launch it, because it is intentional. And what I do, people know me for podcasting, and that's great. And I love it. But what I have a business, and what I do is serving folks, helping them start their own podcast. I work with them on strategy. I help them get out on podcasts, right? Doing the
Yeah.
marketing planning, stuff like that. And what I had realized was that I wasn't taught that. When people do, podcasting programs, let's say, and I so appreciate the program I took, and I love who I took it from, and I wouldn't be here if not for it. However, what I quickly realized was that it wasn't serving my best interest. It was just a to do. It was a money drain. And so I am so glad that you said it, because I think this is a trap that so many of us fall into, where we're doing the things we think we're supposed to do and we think will give us the outcome that we want, but the things are not connected and they're not all leading to the same place. So you stay busy doing this creation over here and then seeing, does it work? Oh, no, doesn't work. And PS, for anybody who is new and just starting out, especially in the online space, most things won't work. Even the most successful people,
Yes.
the big gurus, they've made so many programs that were a flop, but we don't talk about those things. So most things, if they're going to be trial and error, and this can really mess with people's mindsets. And so I love that you mentioned this, Cailen. It's just such a good thing. I want to dig into a little more, so bear with me here. But it's these separate things don't serve us. So we have to have everything we do really leading in. And so thank you, thank you, thank you for bringing that up. And I would love it if you can actually dig deeper into that and talk about vision, and really not only what is the dream schedule, but why is the dream schedule. I think this is something people forget about when they're looking at shifting what doesn't work. They forget that in order to shift what doesn't work, you have to know where the cancer is. You have to
Yeah.
know what's at the bottom root of what's not working. And it's not something you can just think about, and talk with somebody about real quickly and then just go, okay, now I'm going to pivot this way. Oh, this seems to be working for somebody else. Oh, I got this great advice. Yeah, I'm going to try that. If you don't take the time to get under it and figure out why you're doing what you're doing and really taking the time to plan it out, you're just going to keep wasting energy, wasting time, and wasting, um, you know, your feelings. I think for me, it's people talk about success, and success is different to everybody. For me, success is not about money, recognition, anything like that. It's about, am I happy
Mm.
every day? Do I feel good? Do I feel at ease? And so, yeah, I'm babbling on, but I'd love for you to take over the mic now and riff with me.
Yeah. So you said, digging into it and really understanding. And that's why I begin so many of my programs with awareness, like that time inventory. It's about awareness, noticing what is broken and also what is working. Because without recognition of where you're starting from, how the heck are we going to change? How are we going to make any improvements unless we have a clear understanding of, square one? And then the next piece of it, because a lot of people don't want to dig under the hood, right? Like that's not as fun. But the next piece is so fun, and it's giving yourself permission to vision, to dream, to think about, all right, I started this business because I am so freaking passionate about my work, but also I would venture to guess that people started their businesses because they wanted freedom. They wanted to dictate their own schedule. They wanted to travel more, spend more time with loved ones. There was a huge lifestyle piece to this business. Even if you love your work and you feel like you could work 24/7, there was still this element of it, like, and my life would look like this. And yet, so many of us, as we start moving into our work, we're subscribing to that. I've got to work more. I've got to hustle. That's the only way to success. I've got to give all my hours to this thing. Otherwise, I'll never make money. And that's where I was for a really, really long time. For the first 7 years of my business, that was the mentality that was playing for me. And it finally, having my first daughter, gave me permission to reevaluate and say, you know what? Time is my most valuable asset. My lifestyle is my top priority. My business has to be a part of my life, not my life. And so having that vision of this lifestyle was my guiding force. And how am I going to set up my ideal work week? And for me, like I said, it was that 3-day work week. And so after, people move through that time inventory and kind of like dig into it, and they're realizing, oh crap, look at how much time I'm wasting, these stupid things I'm doing. They're probably getting hard on themselves. Then thinking about, but where do I want to go? And once you have that, we have the opportunity to start mapping out a way to get there. And that's where change happens.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Now, wherever we are along the path, and we're never going to be there, I think. That's the nature of human beings, and especially highly driven, highly motivated, high achievers, which, again, if you're listening to this show, I know that's you. So there is always moving. It's always incrementally going beyond what you ever imagined. It's so wild. It's so much fun. Um, and as that happens, I imagine that you want to revisit your work week and your schedule and your priorities and all of that. So this isn't just a get it done, set it and forget it kind of thing and go with the process. You're going to regularly revisit this, right? So I'd love to know, what are your recommendations for kind of how people do revisit their schedule and their plan and their all of those things? And also, can you talk about incremental upgrades, I believe you call it,
Yes.
to really move things towards deeper, I believe, deeper towards your ideal work week vision?
Sure. So I'll cover the first piece about when to revisit. At the very least, I would say give it some consideration once a year. I mean, it's New Year's, and I think that it's something that you can sit with at least one time a year. Just like, is my schedule working? Is this flowing? Is this feeling good? Beyond that, I mean, if you're hiring a new team member, if there's a major shift to your business model, if you're taking on a huge new project, if you maybe prior had full-time or part-time work that you're now leaving to move towards your business, any of those big life changes, having a baby, getting married, anything like that, that would be a really appropriate time to sit with this and think about what shifts or changes might need to be made. And then that kind of leads into that second piece you were asking about, the incremental upgrades. So the incremental upgrades are what take you from where you're at to where you want to go. I have so many women who find me and they're like, oh my goodness, I'm so ready for a 3-day work week. I'm ready to be making 6 figures. Let's do this. And I'm like, okay, so like, tell me about your business, your life, your income, all right now. And they're working their tail off and making very little money. And that's fine. I was there for a really, really long time. It's just part of the journey. So if you're currently working like 80 hours a week on your business, this isn't about suddenly cutting back to 20 hours in one fell swoop. But maybe let's get you your weekends back or your evenings back or Friday afternoons off or whatever it is that leans you into that ideal lifestyle that you envisioned for yourself. Just start small. Take that first step and see how it goes. Maybe you would love to take a yoga class once in a while. And it's like, oh, I'd love to take 3 yoga classes a week. It's like, well, do you take any yet? Oh, no, maybe like once every other month. It's like, okay, well, maybe we could try to get it on the calendar like twice a month and then maybe once a week, step into it. So many people, and I'm guilty of this too, it's that all or nothing mentality. It's like, oh, I either want to be totally there or, forget it, whatever, I'm not going to change anything. And if we can just start small and give ourselves permission to do the little things that are going to start moving the needle in the direction of where we want to go, before you know it, you are in a radically different place in your life and business because you kept just tweaking it all in a positive direction.
I love that. And the other thing I think is really important to point out about doing it this way, those small baby steps, is you don't feel it. It feels good.
Yeah.
Whereas when we throw ourselves into something, I like to use the analogy of a staircase and the
Mm-hmm.
alphabet. And it's like, okay, you're at A right now. You're at the bottom of the stairs and you want to get to Z. And you think that you can just like jump from the bottom or fly to the top, right? A to Z, no problem. Well, you can't. You've got to go through B. And maybe you're there. Maybe you're at D right now, but there's still E, F, G, etc. And so it's like taking one step on a staircase is simple. You don't even feel it.
Yeah.
But if you try and go from the bottom to the top, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And I love that you talk about this incremental upgrade because it is and I'm guilty of it as well, because when we get passionate or we get emotional about something and we see the vision and we want that, it's like we can forget that we may have the keys to some of the steps, but there's a point where we don't, and we need that slow and positive momentum and ongoing. And I in 2018 lost 55 pounds, and I did it very quickly, by a lot of people's standards. But I didn't, I mean, people think I went from where I was to where I am like overnight, but I didn't. It
Yeah.
was every day making the choice to stay the path, you know? And so this is just something I really want people to think about as you're listening, and write it down in a way that speaks to you and feels good for you, to remind yourself you cannot get from A to Z immediately. It may take you 3 months, it may take you a year, 3 years, it may take you 30 years. It could be your whole lifetime, and all of that's perfect. Because when you know where you're going, taking one step at a time, it's always going to feel good. And that's, I think, again, my measure of success is to feel good. And so when you're feeling good, you want to feel good more, and then good more. And this is the way to do it. So, Cailen,
Yeah.
thank you so much for breaking all of this down. I love it so much. If people want to continue the conversation with you, if they want to learn more from you, what's the best step?
Yeah, I have an awesome free Facebook group that people can join. It's called the 3-Day Workweek group. And we're hanging out there talking about this kind of stuff all the time. And if you want to dive deeper into my actual schedule and get a look at how I break down my time, my weeks, how I batch my time and things like that, you can download my 3-Day Workweek schedule. It's at cailenascher.com. It's totally free, and it also gives you a fillable template so you can start designing your own ideal work week.
So good. And we will have links to all of that in the show notes. So fantastic. Before we hang up, before we wrap up, before we're done, any final words of wisdom you want to leave my audience with?
Yes, and you touched on this before, but it's something I say all the time to my clients in my community. It's that the journey has to align with the destination. And the caveat is the destination is always shifting and always moving. So if we want to get to this place of feeling successful and abundant and having a beautiful lifestyle, we have to start intentionally with those incremental upgrades, building that in every step along the way so that it's all lining up.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Nicole.